Welcome. This is Uncommon Sense, a podcast presented by the Gubic CPA Knowledge Centre. The Centre is an initiative of the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the Chartered Professional Accountant profession in Alberta. Our episodes feature conversations with Alberta CPAs sharing their insights on a wide range of timely topics. Alberta CPAs work in every part of the economy and volunteer their time and expertise in virtually every community in Alberta. With each episode, we bring you voices and perspectives that reflect the diverse knowledge and contributions that CPAs bring to our province. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with investment expert and financial planner Ryan Gubic, CPA. I'm Jessica DeGroot, manager with the CPA Education Foundation, and I'm very happy to have Ryan back in the studio to wrap up our chat with him about investing for Canadians. Ryan is the founder and personal CFO of MRG Wealth based in Calgary. He is a skilled and experienced financial advisor, offering services ranging from investment planning to tax advice and overall financial strategizing. He is a chartered professional accountant, a chartered investment manager, and a certified financial planner. He holds a master's in business administration and is also a registered portfolio manager and licensed insurance advisor in Calgary. Ryan also recently completed a term as a member of the CPA Education Foundation Board of Governors. By the way, listeners, if you haven't had a chance to listen to part 1 of this conversation, I highly recommend that you do so. Welcome back, Ryan.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
So in part 1 of our conversation, you talked about the benefits of investing as part of a person's overall financial planning. To start off this episode, I would like to ask you about the concept of risk when it comes to investing. How does risk fit into investment decisions?
When most people think about investing, they think of returns. But risk is equally as important to understand and plan around. So there are many different types or kinds of risks. There's concentration, volatility, liquidity, systematic or market risk, and unsystematic or specific company risks. Also your risks of running out of money in retirement or financial independence.
And what would be the difference between risk tolerance and risk capacity?
So the tolerance is the emotion. It's how comfortable are you with the risk of the market's ups and downs, where a risk capacity is financial. So how much risk can someone afford to take based on their time horizon, income levels, liquidity needs, and overall wealth? So it's really important to have the conversation and understand where you fit, both on the emotional side from a tolerance perspective, as well as on a risk capacity perspective, and then tying that back to all the different types of risks that I mentioned earlier, like the concentration risk, the volatility risk, liquidity, systematic and unsystematic. Risks are an area where I think many families and many Canadians don't fully understand the risks of the investments that they're in impacting their financial health.
Right. So do you find that most clients tend to be more conservative when it comes to risk, or is it the opposite with more clients leaning towards having an appetite for risk, or is it kind of somewhere in between?
It can really depend on various factors, like someone's age, stage of life, but also the state of the markets. As we talked about emotions, money is one of the most emotional things out there. So when markets are going up, people are making money, they tend to say that they're comfortable with risk and want to make money. But on the opposite side, when markets are down and they're losing money, the concept of risk becomes much more real and they often have a lower appetite. So what's happening in someone's surrounding, as well as their age or stage of life, really plays a big factor into risk tolerance and capacity.
So how would you kind of manage that with your clients? Because it would depend on how the markets are. And obviously when, the markets are good, everyone's going to be happy. And when the markets are down, it might not look so good. So what are some ways that you manage that expectation?
So one of the ways is to specifically talk about and call out the risk tolerance and the emotional side versus the risk capacity and the financial side. Both exist and both are there. And I think it's important to have that conversation and for people to realize that they're sometimes two different things. So when we talk about the emotional level, we'll go through, behavioral risk questions and situations and talk through their feelings and thoughts. For example, if, your portfolio dropped 10%, how would you feel about that? And then from a financial side, that's where the financial planning is so vital, because understanding someone's core goals and building out an integrated, holistic financial plan, then we'll be able to talk acutely about the financial aspects of where are their risks, where and what level of risk do they need to take to achieve their goals, and then marry the two together.
So are a person's emotional makeup and overall personality factors when it comes to how they approach risk and investing in general?
Absolutely. So there are people out there that are risk adverse and others that are risk seekers. If you think about hobbies, some people like knitting, while others like skydiving. So an individual's, core personality does have quite often an impact on their risk tolerance, or at least that emotional component of it. So it's important to get to know the person, understand them, understand their goals and their challenges. Sometimes someone with a high risk tolerance doesn't need to take on as much risk to achieve their goals, while other times someone that only wants to invest in lower risk like GICs or savings accounts might need to take on a bit more risk to be able to achieve their goals. And it's again tying in that emotional side with the financial side so that the individual ultimately can make a decision that's right for them, but understand the pros and cons of the decisions with a recommendation, of course, from a professional.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it depends, as you mentioned, on their goals. Like if you're 30 years old and your goal is, you're saving for retirement, you're probably going to have a moderate to higher risk portfolio because you have a lot of time to spend in the market, right?
Yeah, so when we look at different risk factors, time horizon is absolutely one of them. So a 30-year individual that is saving for retirement, and if they want to retire sometime between 55 to 65, for example, and then plans to live until 90 or 95, that's a long time horizon. That same 30-year-old individual, however, if they had a goal on buying their first home in the next 3 years and they were saving money for that down payment, same individual, but that nature of that investment should be different than their retirement investment, right? So a 3-year time horizon on when they need to use all those funds changes their risk capacity for those funds. There's other areas as well, like income level. What income level is an individual making, and what is their capacity to absorb market drops or fluctuations? Children and dependents, many different factors that all need to be thought of together when having that risk conversation.
Mm-hmm. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit now, because you mentioned this proponent of what you call a holistic approach to financial planning. What do you mean by that concept of holistic financial planning?
So what I mean by that is looking at every part of a person's financial life as one integrated system. So there are 6 critical areas of everyone's financial life. In order to achieve your goals, it's important that all 6 of those are integrated together, reviewed, and are working together in an integrated fashion. So the 6 areas are financial management and budgeting, tax, investments, risk, retirement, and estate. And to really get from where you are to where you want to be in the most efficient and effective way, that holistic planning process and system of integrating all the areas of your financial life together need to be working is critical.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So what if somebody didn't have, what if they had a couple of those areas, like personal budget, and what was the first one?
So financial management and budgeting, understanding your personal income statement, your cash flow, your budget, everything kind of ties into that first bucket.
Right. Okay. So they have that, but what if they don't have an estate?
So when I say integrating all the 6 areas, if you're living, you will have some estate risks and considerations at any age of life. So for example, if you have, a married couple that's, 45 years old with 2 kids, some of their goals that they're thinking of right away might be more geared towards their kids' education and their retirement and financial independence, and estate might not be the top goal on their mind. However, from an estate perspective, they still have, at some point, they will, unfortunately pass away, right? That's a kind of death and taxes, unfortunately, in life are inevitable, right?
Inevitable.
So it's trying to be proactive with that. So when you look at an estate, and again, at different age and different stages of life, there'll be different risks and considerations. But at that stage of life, your estate, some of the questions and pieces that should be in your plan is, do you have an up-to-date will, power of attorney, and personal directive, right? That is really important to make sure that your wishes will be executed. When you have children that are under the age of 18, heaven forbid something were to happen to, the parents, who is going to be looking after those children? And don't leave it to chance. Having it, formally discussed between obviously the parents, but also the family, and legally documented is really important. Life insurance as part of an estate planning tool, depending on a family's net worth at the time, what risks do they have financially to, the dependents or the spouses or other family members involved if someone were to pass away or get disabled or have a critical illness? How are you managing that? If there are businesses impacted, how does that work? And then, if you want to leave a legacy to the children, if there's a family cabin, there's so many different situations or areas that estate plays in. So I think that's an area where, depending on the age of the individual, it might not be their top priority or the thing that they're thinking about the most right now, but they still have risks, and it's still important to include that in the financial plan. So that's where I say there's 6 areas, and all 6 of them really should be touched on and integrated together. And throughout someone's life, one of the 6 or more might be higher priorities than at other times of their life, but still need to be integrated part of their plan.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. My husband and I recently, within the last year, we were in that process of creating our will and personal directives and all of that fun stuff that I think it's, it's kind of like money. It's like a very complex thing to do, and it's hard. So it's easily avoided, but it is necessary, especially when you have kids.
Yeah. And how did you feel after you're done completing that step of the process?
Well, it was something that, was top of mind, or not top of mind, but it was on our minds for a long time. So it felt very relieving to get it done. And we have it now. It's there in place. We'd never want to use it. It was a difficult thing to do because you are looking so far ahead into the future. But for us, our kids are young. So we were kind of we're going to redo this when our kids are adults. So we were kind of just thinking between now and then, which kind of helped to make it a little bit more realistic. Because if I'm thinking this isn't going to change between now and the time I'm 80, you can't even fathom what to put.
And thank you for sharing that. And that's what a lot of clients and individuals will share as well. One of the earlier things you said is kind of like a weight off your shoulders. It felt lighter that you had it done. And the second piece, which is really important, and it ties into planning in general, is you plan on updating it again. It's not a set it and forget it mentality. And when we deal with personal finances, and specifically holistic financial planning, same kind of concept applies. It's an evergreen document that lives with you and changes with you. Just because you do a financial plan when you're 30 or 40 or 50 doesn't mean it's not going to change the next year or 2 years after. So it's important that you're always, revisiting that plan and saying, okay, is there any other areas, just like you talked about with your will and personal directives, that might need to be changed? Retirement planning, does that need to be changed? The investment strategy, does that need to be changed? Budgeting for many people can quite often change on an annual basis.
Right. Yeah, and I can see how maybe, if one of those 6 areas changes significantly, it will impact all of them.
Absolutely.
As a financial planner, how do you specifically help people approach financial planning from this holistic perspective?
So it starts from understanding your core values and your vision for what you want to achieve in life. So another way of asking that is what does success look like to you? So the values, or the personal values of an individual, really simply, those are what's most important to them. For example, quite often I'll hear about family and health and other areas of that nature. And the core values of someone can then be used by them to create their vision statement. And their vision is really, what are you trying to accomplish and what does success look like? And I don't mean, retire by 65 or have X amount in the bank. Those are maybe some milestones or some targets that you want to hit. But when you're talking about a vision, it's much more broad and much more some depth into it as well. So what do you want to do in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Who are you spending time with? Where are you, living or traveling? What kind of lifestyle and activities do you want to do? So put as much detail in your vision as possible, and that helps you have a direction on where you want to go, and then your plan and your decisions you make around that vision become much more simpler and help you get from where you are to where you want to be. So really, it's the foundation to building a personalized, holistic financial plan. Without understanding your values and your vision, then you just have numbers on a page. And are the numbers on the page ultimately going to get you where you want to go?
Right. So how do you use this vision and set of personal values to help your clients when it comes to investing?
So as I mentioned, it's foundational. So it's the starting conversation. When I meet a new individual, even just for an introduction call, and within the first 15, 20 minutes, we are starting to talk about what their values and their vision is, to understand what are they looking for help with, understanding already what their challenges are that they've told me, but what does success look like for them? So it's really foundational. It's a starting step. And for many people, they've not been asked that question before. So it does take some time to think about it and reflect. And like you mentioned earlier, there needs to be updates. So when someone develops their vision statement or has their vision, it's not a set it and forget it. It's fine tune it, tweak it, think about it some more, work with your partner if you have one. What is their vision? How does it integrate together? And someone's vision at 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, at 60, so forth, it might change and evolve over the time as their life changes and evolves, as well as they had more time to think about it. So as a foundation then, so once someone understands what their vision is, we can build out an investment strategy to help get them from where they are to where they want to be, which is that vision. Another analogy I quite often use with clients and just talking about this topic is a roadmap. So think about it. Have you ever got into your car and start driving without knowing where you're going to go?
No.
Doesn't sound like it'd be very productive,
rely heavily on my
right?
GPS.
Well, GPS is the roadmap, but even to use your GPS, you need to know the end destination, right? We generally don't jump in the car and just say, I'm going to go for a 45-minute drive, and I don't know if I'm going north, south, east, west, or which highway. I'll just end where I end. Most of the time, we go in and we say, hey, I have to go somewhere. I have to go to the grocery store. I have to go to the kids' activities. I want to do this. And then we use a tool, like you said, your GPS, to get you there. Well, financial planning is very similar. So your vision is really your end destination. So this is what I want to achieve. This is where I want to go. And then the holistic financial planning process is to build out that roadmap to say, okay, you're here. You want to get over there. Here's what you need to do, or the directions and steps you need to take to achieve that. And then along the way, you might take a wrong turn here or there, or things happen. Life always happens. Life changes are one of the only constants in life, as I like to say. The planning process should be at least annual, where you're working with a trusted professional that understands you, your vision, all the 6 areas of your financial life together. And as things change, it could be the economy, it could be the markets, it could be politics, it could be your job, it could be the family. Who knows? There's always changes. But let's check. Are you still on track to get to your destination? Are you still on track to achieve that vision of the life that you want and all your goals? And if the answer is no, which sometimes it is no, we're off track right now, that's okay. What's more important is then understanding what are your options to get back on track, right? So that's how values and vision really comes tying in together with investing in financial planning. And that holistic plan drives the investment strategy. So once you understand where you're going and you have a roadmap to get there, then all of a sudden you can build out a strategic investment strategy, quite often with the investments that are applicable to you, meaning that they're the right risk level, they're the right growth drivers or targets for cash flow, looking at different accounts because different accounts have different tax impacts, looking at different accumulation strategies depending on your age, and looking at different decumulation or kind of withdrawal strategies depending on your stage of life. So all of that all ties in together.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I can see how you can really get to know a person from gathering that information about them and then using it to make a very customized roadmap for them to get where they want to be.
Yeah, it's a shift from kind of being unintentional with money. For example, many of us work really hard and, we try and save X amount per month or year, but ultimately in the background, it's a hope that it will be enough, right? Like I put X amount to the RESPs this year, and hopefully when I'm 65, it will be enough to do what I want to do. And it's flipping it from doing that to being very intentional and knowing exactly what those actions will turn into, or to the best of your ability using kind of assumptions and variables that's what the projected plan is going to be. And if you want a different outcome, here's your options that you have early on in life to be able to make some changes now. So you're not waking up when you're 55, 60, 65, or whatever age that is, and not maybe having as many options as you did in your 30s or 40s or 50s.
Mm-hmm. This might seem like an odd question, but are there types of people who you think shouldn't become investors, perhaps because of their personality or their personal values?
I think we're all investors. So whether we invest in financial markets, we invest in kids, we invest in our families, we invest in ourselves, we invest in the community. So just like all people need to eat, and thus we learn to cook, people need money, and investing is a core tool to help them. So I think, investing is part of life. It's all around us. So depending on how someone views that word or what it looks like, I think we are all investors.
Right. I think we all often hear of common misconceptions when it comes to investing. And in the last episode, we talked a little bit about the New York stock market and, screaming and yelling about selling and buying stocks. What would you say are some of the most common mistakes or misconceptions that people make when it comes to investing? And how can these types of mistakes be avoided?
So there's 4 big challenges and mistakes people often make. So the first one is around poor planning. Second is around volatile investments. The third is around tax inefficiencies. And the fourth is around missing advice. So volatile investments create uncertainty and worry for people. The limited or no planning creates an environment where they're not sure if they're on track to achieve their goals or not, and might have this looming feeling in the back of their mind, like, are they doing what's best for them, or is there something better out there? Not having tax strategies or not having tax optimization means that they could be made more tax than they could be or need to be, thus having less wealth for themselves and their families. And the fourth being that missing advice, without having answers to your questions, can quite often lead to costly mistakes. So those are the 4 big challenges and mistakes I see people quite often have and make. And it's, again, around poor planning, volatile investments, tax inefficiencies, and missing advice. The other components within that, so when we look at, for example, volatile investments, because we were talking about investing in the last podcast and this podcast, is around asset classes. So an asset class is a type of investing, or a type of investment, sorry. So think of the stock market as one asset class. Another example of an asset class could be, bonds. Another example of an asset class could be real estate. Another example could be farmland, right? So there's a big difference, and it has been for many decades now, on how the average Canadian invests and how ultra high net worth families, institutions, and pension funds invest. And I have this on my website if you ever want to see the facts in graph form. It's just summarized. But ultimately, the average Canadian quite often just invests in the stock and bond market, right? And that could be through individual holdings of stocks, it could be through mutual funds, or it could be through ETFs. But essentially, they're just putting most of their eggs in the stock market and bond market baskets. And when you look at how high net worth families, institutions, and pension funds invest, and this is not new, they've been doing this for decades, many of them invest in multiple asset classes. Okay. And they do this because historically that has reduced the risk in their investment portfolio while generating attractive returns and also helping with some tax optimization in there. So I think that's another big challenge many Canadians have, and it ties to the second challenge of volatile investments. When you're only investing in two asset classes, with most of the Canadians' money in the stock market that I see, it's a very volatile asset class. And volatility means, prices can go up and down quite frequently. And you quite often have a sinking feeling in the back of your stomach. You don't know when the next drop's going to be. So that you don't have that certainty there. When you're looking at quality investments, you're looking at a broad market index like the Canadian stock market or the US stock market, the data has shown like over the last, 30, 50, 100 years, the market has gone up. But it's also shown there are significant periods of drops. And you can see a 30 or 40% drop, and it's without expectation. So again, going back to that risk tolerance and emotional piece, no one likes losing money. So one of the challenges with volatile investments or the solutions around that is to speak with a trusted investment professional and see if there's opportunities to diversify your portfolio. And even just ask yourself, why do high net worth families, institutions, and pension funds invest so differently than just the stock and bond market? And am I just invested in the stock and bond market? And should I be doing something different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, for many of us, it can often feel like the wealthy have some sort of like secret when it comes to money. But I guess one of the secrets is don't put all of your eggs in one basket or one asset class.
Absolutely. Diversification can help. It's still important that when you diversify, you still are working with a trusted professional to do the proper due diligence on the investment vehicle that you're investing in or the type of investment. But diversifying it out, for example, when the stock market drops, there's specific asset classes that still historically made clients money from a growth perspective as well as a cash flow perspective.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. If someone wanted to contact you, Ryan, or learn more about MRG Wealth or investing or anything that we discussed today, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to our website at mrgwealth.com and schedule an introduction call with me directly. Happy to have a chat. The other thing is if you want a clear path to financial independence, I put together a straightforward 7-step guide using the system we build for our families every day. And you can download it for free on our website as well at mrgwealth.com.
And before we wrap up our conversation, I just want to ask you to reflect on your experience as a member of the CPA Education Foundation Board of Governors. Earlier this year, you wrapped up your term as a governor. And what did you take away from the experience?
So much. Maybe just to reiterate for the listeners out there, the CPA Education Foundation is the charitable arm of the CPA profession in Alberta. And the purpose of the foundation is to strengthen the future of the accounting profession in Alberta by supporting education and students. And of the many things I learned as a foundation board member, I was perhaps most impressed with the wide range of activities and initiatives led by the foundation. It plays a huge role in keeping the profession closely connected to post-secondary, business facilities, accounting educators, and future CPAs. So CPAs can support the work of the foundation by spreading the word about the foundation through their networks, considering making a donation to the foundation, or attending foundation events. The foundation is a registrable charity, and you can also have a tax receipt for those donations for those that are interested. And by the way, liking and subscribing to this podcast is also a great way to support the foundation's work. And if you're a high school or post-secondary business student or a CPA candidate, the foundation also offers a wide array of scholarships and awards that you might be eligible for. So please check out the available awards on the foundation website because the foundation wants to help you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts, Ryan. And thank you for being such a fantastic guest for us over the last 2 episodes. You've really provided listeners with so many valuable insights around investment and overall financial planning. I have learned a lot myself, and I'm sure that our listeners have as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise so freely with us. And it's been great talking with you.
Thanks, Jessica. It was an honor.
The Uncommon Sense podcast is presented by the CPA Education Foundation and funded by the Heshie CPA Knowledge Center. The Knowledge Center was created through a generous donation by the late Brian Heshie. Brian was a distinguished Albertan, business leader, CPA, educator, and community builder. His generosity and commitment to education underpinned his good works across Alberta throughout his lifetime. The opinions expressed on Uncommon Sense do not necessarily reflect the views of the CPA Education Foundation. We would like to acknowledge that CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories and Métis Nation homeland. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous people and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated. Technical and recording services for this podcast provided by Wolf Willow Studios in Edmonton. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you have any comments about the podcast, write to us at cpaef@cpaalberta.ca. To learn more about the CPA Education Foundation and the Heshi CPA Knowledge Centre, visit cpaalberta.ca/foundation.